That's what I thought. Welcome, everybody, and yes, I know it's being recorded. Yes, we're gonna hide the video panel. There we go. So, we want to welcome Linda Leblanc to our meeting tonight. She's been writing great posts about the nature of the NEECA trails and what she finds along the way. And I know some people got to go out on a field trip last week, and I got to see in person some of the good stuff. And basically, I'm looking forward to this. Linda's a great writer. I know some of the pieces that I've been reading that really capture what the essence of what's happening out there in the forest. So without further ado, Linda Blank.
Thanks, Dave. Well, thank you, everybody, for having me here tonight. I really appreciate it. And I also want to give a big shout out and thank you to my husband, Bernie, because he's the one that helped me put this presentation together. And if he hadn't physically put it together, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And by way of introduction, I met Ernie back in 1969 at the University of Maine, Orono. And we were in the School of Forest Resources together. We were both wildlife management majors. And there were two other women in the program. So that was interesting for 4 years. And I was obviously going to meet somebody. And I did, and he was the pick of the bunch.
Pick of the litter.
Yeah, he was the pick of the litter. When we graduated, we both went into teaching. We became science specialists for the elementary grades at Weymouth Public Schools. And that's on the South Shore of Boston, big school system. And I stayed in that position until 2006. I retired from teaching. We came out here to Royalston, bought our retirement home, our dream home, and we had our retirement jobs. He went to Amherst College, and I went to Athol area YMCA. And I became the child care services director there for 9 years. And it was an awesome job. It just about killed me, but I really loved that job. It was 51 weeks a year, and it was 5 days a week, and it involved preschool and after school childcare kids, and it involved the summer day camp at Camp Sealet and Tully. So we were always with children. But the good thing about the job was I could continue to teach natural science to kids because I was the director. So I did. And we just had the best time. But I did retire from that job in 2015. And soon after that, I got my lifelong dream, and that was to buy my first horse. Actually, my last horse too, because I'm getting too old to have another one after her. And let's see if we can do this correctly. Oh. Well, I'm pushing.
This was working and tell you what to use it.
Yeah, of course, I'm pushing forward, so I don't know what's going on.
I've had problems with the thing on Zoom.
Okay.
Better than able to do it.
That's okay, I can do that, so we're doing the dance. Okay, all right. I'm on something that has. So I bought Vidalia, I call her V for short, in 2017. She was 16 years old, and she is what you call a chestnut pinto. She's a redhead basically, and she's a pinto with blue eyes. She is a quarter horse thoroughbred cross. She was a lesson horse all of her life. She was a good girl, but she was at the end of her rope as far as being a teacher. We were both teachers. And when I bought her, she was pretty shut down. And lesson horses can often be that way. They just kind of retreat into a shell, and it's hard to kind of get to their brain or emotions. So one way I was able to kind of bring her out of the shell over the years was to go on trail rides and to take her for walks in a halter and lead rope. And she was a great trail horse. She loved it. She just came alive. And we had some wonderful trail rides, Lake Denison and that at NEECA. Unfortunately, she developed equine asthma fairly soon after I bought her, which got worse over the years. And so I haven't really ridden her now in 2 years. Probably just as well, because she's 22, I'm 73. My balance isn't very good anymore, so we're probably better if we keep all 6 feet on the ground as much as possible. Doesn't always work that way, but we try anyways, so. This is how we do it now, we go for walks, and she has a halter, I have a lead rope, and we try to stay together as much as possible. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the horse park where we walk and show you a map of the park before I actually show you the plants and animals. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with NEECA, the New England Equestrian Center of Athol. The site, the park itself is on East Sherborne Road. It's a little bit after the golf course and before Bigelow Road. NEECA is both an organization and the horse park. So the organization was started, I think, in 2001. Its mission is to promote good horsemanship, to preserve and protect land for equestrians, and just in general to provide for the betterment of the horse. So we have over 270 members. We have a board of directors, and the board actually meets here at the Athol Ma Club once a month, and our office is upstairs on the 3rd floor. And it's awesome. We're so thrilled to have that. We are open, the park itself is open year round. And it's open to everybody, okay, so it's not just for equestrians. And it's just a wonderful place to go if you want to photograph nature, or you want to walk. If you want to walk your dog, just have your dog on a leash. If you want to go birding, or just general nature study, it's wonderful because once you go in the park, like I was today, it's totally quiet in there. Unless there's an event going on, you might hear a plane overhead from the Orange Airport, that's it. It's quiet, it's isolated, it's peaceful, and it's just a wonderful place to be. So, I'm on the board, and my role, or at least I made up my role, was to kind of, enhance our mission by making this more accessible to people who want to enjoy the park, not as equestrians, but just in general. There's no hunting, there's no motorized vehicles. It's open all the time, it's never locked, so there is a gate that's at the sign, full gate, what do you call that kind of gate? And it may be closed, it may look like it's locked, it's not, it just has a chain around it, so just under the chain. And you can drive in, the parking areas are clearly marked. And you can park there and just go about whatever it is, nature study, walking. It's also great in winter for cross-country skiing, for snowshoeing. When I'm out there in the winter, if it's not a really bad winter, you can just really walk out there in your snow boots. We don't plow it, but the walking is not bad. And I've seen cross-country skiers out here, so it's obviously, something that they enjoy. The trails are wide, most of them. Because obviously they're for horses and riders, so they're quite wide, they're generally pretty level. And there are some trails that are a little bit more challenging perhaps, but overall it's a very easy walk. And our own Christy Dorn of the Athol Nature Club, who created your signs for your native garden. On the building outside here, I tackled her and we got a grant, and she has done some signs for a native plant trail at NEECA. She also did our map recently as well. She did a wonderful job. And let me see if this works. Does that work? Oh, cool, it does. Okay. The entrance is right here. It's right on Sherborne Road. And like I said, there's a gate here, but you can open that up and drive in. And there's a trailer parking lot here that you can go right into, as long as there are no trailers, there's no events going on. There's also a spectator parking lot. And when you first come in, you're gonna see a really large area that's got the riding rings and the food booths and so forth. But other than that, the rest of the park is pretty much forest, field, meadow, glade. There's some vernal-type ponds there as well. The barn where I keep Vidalia is like right here. It happens to belong to our family pet vet that you may be familiar with, Dr. Sue Ellen McComber. She has 2 horses, and she invited me to bring Vidalia to stay at the barn when she first built it in 2019. So when I go to NEECA, I actually take this stacked stone trail, which is gonna be part of our walk tonight. And this is actually by our property, but she has it open to the public. And so if you're in the park, you can come down this way, down towards our barn. And if you really want to start at the barn, you just have to really contact me. And as long as you don't have more than 1 or 2 cars, you could park here and walk in this way. So the main trail is this Elwyn Bacon Trail. And it goes through this open area, which is all, like I said, the riding rings and so forth. It goes through a field right around here. And then it goes into the woods. The native plant trail is this joint-up trail that we recently had a walk at. This trail is a little bit of a windy forest trail. Whereas the Elwyn Bacon is much wider. Like I said, it's really made for horses and riders and horses and drivers, so a cart could actually use that trail. The 3 Chicks Trail is another windy forest trail that goes by the vernal-type pond. The only trail that's really kind of dicey is the Davenport Pond Trail Loop. It's really glacial right here, so there's a lot of rock. It's up and it's down. The soil is thin, so where it gets muddy, it just gets really muddy and slow, and so it's a little bit hard sometimes to walk this, but it's certainly doable. So that's Christy's map, and what I'm gonna do is start you on the Stone Trail right here. And let's see if I can just keep remembering to advance this. There we go. So when we first moved to the barn, just, very close to the barn is the start of the trail. There was this windthrown tree, and I noticed there was a heart in the root ball. And that just seemed to me like kind of a good sign that maybe this was a good move for us, that we would be happy at the barn. And that, NEECA would be a place that I could really enjoy and learn more about. And it proved to be that way. Eventually the heart kind of fell down, the whole tree collapsed upon itself. There was a Carolina wren that kind of took up residence here. And that tree is pretty much gone now, but that's what I saw in 2019 and 2020 when I would first start on the trail with Vidalia. Oh, geez. Oh, there we go. There she is. This is the Stackstone Trail, and this trail was put in through a woodlot. And on the left-hand side, that part of the woodlot was logged about 15 years ago. And a lot of the trees were taken out. What was left was really what foresters would call junk wood. It was just really skinny, scrawny, tall pines. Not a whole lot else. A few big trees were left, but really not much else. And the woodlot on the other side pretty much is the way it's been, I think, for the last 40 or 50 years. It's wet there, so that trail has been built up quite a bit. It's kind of a lot of gravel and sand. I think Pete Lyman put it in. Yeah, he did a wonderful job at NEECA. So it's a little bit elevated, and on either side, there's ditches where it gets quite damp, quite wet. And like I said, it's quite wet on either side of the trail. She's facing the barn, and her tail's facing north, and that's where NEECA would be. So the few trees that were left behind, the larger ones, quite a few of them eventually got wind thrown. And it was a sad thing, but when they leave a pit like that fills with water, it does leave an opening for animals. And so one year, the bullfrog was in there, and this pit filled with water was only about this big. So I was a little bit surprised to see a bullfrog, because normally you're in a canoe in a lake or a pond, but he was there until it dried up. And the green frogs are very common, especially around the pasture. The young green frogs are in the drainage ditches around the pasture every spring. And frogs were something I did a lot with in polywogs with the children at camp and at Kids Depot. We'd always have like a pond life aquarium, and we would get polywogs at Silver Lake or at Tully Pond, Camp Stila, and have an aquarium. One thing you want to do, though, I learned, is that you want to make sure you watch who you put in with your polywogs. This is a predaceous diving beetle. This one's actually in a culvert along the trail that was dried up. And I love water bugs. I like beetles a lot too. So this is like an interesting insect to me, but it is really a predator. And they do love to eat polywogs, so you don't want to mix them up with your polywog population in your tank. This is his head. Oops, I don't remember to do this. This is the head end right here, if you're kind of wondering. And this was a great beetle to teach adaptations about with children, because their legs are adapted beautifully for swimming. They're not elegant swimmers, but they are pretty good swimmers. They dive, like the name says. And the leg has actually hairs on it that can collapse. So when the legs go forwards, the hairs collapse. And when the leg is doing the backstroke, the legs open up. And it kind of makes the paddle on an oar. So they're wonderful swimmers. They're very streamlined. They carry an air bubble under their wing covers. And of course, they're beetles, so they have chewing jaws. So they're voracious. Polywogs, like I said. Ooh, why does that do that? And their larvae are just as predatory. This is from a book that I absolutely love, and you don't have to be a frog enthusiast. She is a writer, a scientist, and she lived in the early 1900s. Actually, she was born in like 1860. She wrote the book, I think, in 1906. And it's a wonderful book with beautiful illustrations of frogs and toads of eastern New England. And a lot of the illustrations are these pencil drawings as well. And I found this predaceous diving beetle once in one of the puddles that was made by this overthrown tree. And all I saw was this kind of wormy thing kind of floating up to the surface. And I kind of knew what it was when it got to the surface, because they have spiracles here where they can get oxygen at the surface of the water, and then they slowly sink back down again. And they're called water tigers because they're so voracious. Vidalia is very patient while I'm in the ditches and puddles and I'm in the pits left by trees. She just kind of stands there and waits for me. This was in a culvert on the trail that was kind of dried up. And you probably know it's a morning cloak. And I'm probably telling you a lot of things here that you know already. So that's why I'm not spending too much time on any one thing. The harbinger of spring. And this is a insect I look for around March when I go up on the trail. And there's a part of the Elma Bacon Trail where the males patrol. And I guess they patrol for the females very early in the spring. And the larvae, the caterpillars, are communal, I understand. I've only seen one once. They eat aspen, excuse me, and birch and cottonwood, which is there at the park. When they become butterflies around latish summer. They estivate, they just kind of go to sleep. It's kind of like a summer dormancy. And they will not come out of estivation until early fall. And then in the fall, and very early winter, they're still active, and then they do finally hibernate, like, in a wood pile or under some bark for the winter. And then come out again that spring, the early spring, when snow's still on the ground. So they're very long lived for butterfly, they live about 10 months. And this is just one of the signs of spring that I look for at NEECA. What else doing? Well, I don't know, I must not have a minute. Huh? Yeah. I'm trying. Are you doing this or not? Because I'm pushing this. Here, why don't you take your hand off for a second? I can find this like this, but- Yeah, it's all technology is not my thing.
Well, bye. No, I can't find it. Oh, that came back too. Can't even see this. There it is. Excuse us for this technical moment. Then it disappears when it gets behind it.
Gosh.
Slideshow. Okay, now.
You just feel the bucket line.
I think it's down our,
Huh?
down our, maybe.
Oh, down here, you can see it, I think all set. Okay, that's forward, that's back, this. No, that's not doing it either. Let me try this, let's just. This will go. And don't touch. No.
There we go.
So what are you doing? Because I was just pressing that pad, but it doesn't like me.
Okay, there you go.
All right, I don't. Oh, great. Like I'm gonna find that. All right, yeah. Okay, well, anyways, so I told you that on the Stackstone Trail, it's very wet. And I decided, I think last year, you know, looking at all these sedges and rushes and grasses growing, that I had no idea what they were. I was gonna try to identify at least a few of them. So that's what I did. I did the easiest ones possible. And I have to tell you, aside from the frog book, which has lovely writing and wonderful illustrations and just a great voice. This was the other book that I've been using the last couple of years, and this is by Brown-Elman, and I think probably Elman is familiar to you. It's grasses, sedges, and rushes. And for a very difficult topic, this is about as clear as you're gonna get. I love this book. I still don't know much about these plants, but I really appreciate them. I like knowing the names of a few of them. So the one that's on the left is an easy one because the flowers are midway on the blade there. And that's pretty distinctive, and that's soft flush. I can tell you that name, I can remember stuff like that, I can't remember important things, that's juncus useless. The one in the middle is, sallow sedge, I'm having troubles with these names. This is a real common, the juncus is common, the sallow sedge is very common along the trail and around the pasture. Looks like a porcupine, and, it's a low growing plant. And in the fall, that flower just turns these interesting, beautiful colors of yellow and brown and tan and gold. On either side, that's sweet fern that's growing, that's a favorite plant of mine. But sallow sedge is just kind of an interesting texture, interesting appearance, and it's very common, so I like it. And then you probably know, maybe, that's wool grass. That's a scirpus, I think, and this is a very tall plant. It's a little bit later developing. It just kind of comes into its own a little bit later in the summertime, and right around now, the flowers have turned to fruit, and the seeds are very fuzzy, very woolly, and that's how it gets its name. That's another very, very common plant that's around the wetlands at NEECA. And excuse me, there's a few others that I learned, but honestly, over this winter, I forgot a lot of them, so I'm gonna have to go back again and relearn. Please, thank you. Oh, no. Okay, why did it do that? There we go. On the Stackstone Trail, and really all throughout NEECA, probably the most common plant is dewberry. I don't know if you're familiar with dewberry there on the left. This is a very creeping, crawling sort of plant. It grows where there's a disturbed area, but it also grows in the woods. It's in a lot of different places. And on the Stackstone Trail in the spring, there's so many flowers on this plant creeping on the ground. It looks like there's snow on the trail. It's very, very pretty. It is kind of a pain in the neck because you can see how prickly the stems are. The stems are so low and they tend to root where they hit the ground that they make these little hobbles. So you're always catching your toes on this plant. And if you try to rip it out, you gotta wear gloves because otherwise you're just gonna get all those fines in your hand. So it's a lovely plant. It's very common. I have an affinity for it, like white pine. And by the way, you know Aldo Leopold, probably, San County Almanac. He said something to the effect that white pine is very choosy about its neighbors, like people, and it has an affinity for dewberry. If dewberry is growing, probably white pine will do very well too. And it's right, because the woodlot alongside the Stackstone Trail, that was all logged. It's all blueberry and it's all white pine. And it's just it's a really neat plant, but has its issues when you're around it. I also kind of got obsessed with asters there for a while last fall. And I just thought, oh, there's all these asters. I really ought to learn a few names here. Well, then when I got into asters, I realized, oh, this is not an easy thing, because to identify them, you have to look at things like their bracts here, whether they're pointy, whether they're one color or two color, whether they're curled, whether they're long, whether they're short. You have to look at the stems and how the leaves are put on the stem. It's not just all about the flower. And this is a purple stemmed aster, I think. And it grows along the pasture, it grows along the Stackstone Trail. And it's not just that it's got a purple stem, but the leaves, I learned, are kind of clasping on the stem, for one thing. And if I remember correctly, I think the bracts are supposed to be pointy and long and all green. But again, I've forgotten a lot about what I learned last fall. I have to go back and check it out again. I was just out at the Stackstone Trail this afternoon, and of course, the goldenrod is just unbelievable right now. I've never seen so much yellow. It's just beautiful. And I am not going to identify goldenrods because I'm not gonna live long enough, but I do appreciate them. They're a real keystone species. They're very, very important to pollinators, wildlife in general. Where I was, all I could hear were bees. It was very quiet, because it always is. All I could hear was bees and crickets. What made me stop was a toady. He was in the thick of the goldenrods, and I couldn't see him, but he went, "Oi!" And he did that a few times, and then he kind of just moved off away from me. But that made me stop and really appreciate the goldenrod and the asters, of course. And also on the Stackstone Trail, there's a lot of this fern, which is bracken fern. And we'll look at that again in a second. Excuse me. We don't always have to go out on the Stackstone Trail. Sometimes we can kind of appreciate things from the barn, especially in the winter if we can't get out very easily. And I'm literally looking at Vidalia from the barn door, and she's literally looking across the pasture to the Stackstone Trail, so not that far away. And when a horse looks like that, you really should pay attention because they're very sincere. They don't kid you about anything. And if they're alarmed or worried or curious or whatever, you need to pay attention to them. So she's kind of looking at something, but she's watching it like it's TV. She's not particularly worried here. She's definitely curious and she's wondering what she's looking at. So what she was looking at is right here. Tell what it is?
Okay.
Right.
Is it a bobcat?
Yeah. Yeah. Does that look like a bobcat print? I'm actually seriously, because I mean, I am not a tracker. But is that a typical bobcat print? Because that was all over the trail. After I went out afterwards. Huh?
Yeah.
I don't know. I really, like I said, I'm not a tracker, but you know, they just have these incredibly long legs. They always look like they're on stilts, and of course the short tail. And I've seen that bobcat much better than that. It's walked along the irrigation of the drainage ditch at the edge of the pasture, much closer to me. I was really able to get a good look at it, and it just kind of sauntered along the ditch in the snow, popped up on the Stackstone Trail, walked down a little bit, and then went into the gray birch thicket. And I read somewhere that gray birch thickets are exactly where they like to go to hunt. So that was what she was looking at. And then Ernie can tell you about this one. This was just a little bit away from the barn, and that wood lot that was logged. It's all birch now and bracken fern and so forth. So you want to tell about your?
Oh, this is just, was probably standing about 50 feet away from me in the open. It's an old white-tailed deer. You can tell by the gray in the muzzle, it's like your dog starts to look old, and that's what this is a really old white-tailed deer. You can see that its antlers are still in velvet, and it's going to have a huge rack. And that animal just stared at me and looked at me. I walked by it and it never moved. And that's one of the things I think the value is always looking at as well.
Oh, yeah. Horses don't particularly like deer and moose. It freaks them out quite a bit. And actually, I won't show you the next slide quite yet. Sometimes I'll go in the barn. I go to the barn every day and I spend several hours. And sometimes I'll walk in the barn and it's like right away, there's something wrong with the horses. I mean, horses worry a lot. They're prey animals, so they're always concerned about being eaten. And there's just like something going on. Sometimes they stay out in their paddock and they won't come in the stall. Or they'll stay in their stall, but they won't go out in the paddock. And they're looking over their shoulders like this. When that happens, I've learned to go walk out on the Stackstone Trail, duck into that log wood lot, and a little path that we cut, and look for this. Anybody know what that is? Oh, just shut up. Who's cool? Sound good? I'm looking at you too, Dave, it's like you're.
That's cool.
That's, okay,
It's big, it's cool.
it's big. It's big, and, it's, I mean, I can see the barn from where these are, I mean, there's several piles, you know, different years, when I go out, when the horses are a little freaked out, I find loose droppings, and, excuse me, I haven't actually seen the moose, but I know it's around by the horse's behavior. Oh, darn. Come on, please, thank you. I mentioned that there was a Carolina wren that was, in the heart tree there at the beginning, the ball of roots that had the heart in it. Carolina wrens come into the tack room, into the barn every once in a while, and, they get really mad. Oh, I get so mad, you know how Carolina wrens are, they're very curious and they've gotta come in and check stuff out, and then they get stuck and then they're like swearing at you. I love Carolina wrens, and they're around the barn. I'm not gonna talk too much about the birds. The bird life is wonderful around the barn in at NEECA. Excuse me. Red shoulder hawk, yep, and this is another sign of spring for me. I'll be in the barn and doing some work. And in the spring, I'll hear these birds up in the air, and it's the red shoulder hawks, and I assume they're courted. They're very noisy. I say that they're very yucky. So that's just a couple of the birds around the barn, but I can easily, if I'm just picking paddocks or picking the stalls and my head's down, I can hear 13 different species without picking my head up, you know, and that's easy, easy peasy. So he says, enough of this already, I'm done with Stackstone Trail, I wanna go home. But we're gonna continue on north towards NEECA. And when you first approach NEECA on Stackstone Trail, you come to this field. I assume this was woods about 21 or 22 or 3 years ago. And I think when they cleared the land for the event areas, for the riding rooms and so forth, I think they probably cleared this as well. And excuse me, this is where I stopped today just to see all that gorgeous goldenrod. This is obviously winter. And this place never takes a bad picture. For some reason, I don't know why, the sky always looks beautiful to me. This is like a lowering sky in the winter. And even in the winter, I think it's beautiful because the red maple twigs give it a red lavender haze in the winter time. And being a disturbed area, you know, there's aspen in there, there's birch. The red maples that were cut have sprouted, the red oaks have sprouted. And it's just, I find them a very interesting place. The bracken fern turns these metallic colors. I just think the field is really an interesting place. And we can walk, this is the Elm and Bacon Trail. We can walk north towards the event area, but we're actually gonna go this way into the woods pretty soon. But first, just let me show you a few of the plants that are in the field. I've learned so much since I moved to the barn and since I moved to the North Quadrant area. Actually, the South Shore, I think, has really different plants compared to here. And along the Stackstone Trail and along the Bacon Trail in the field, there's this little obscure plant. I mean, it's got the thinnest stem, and it's only about, I don't know, this tall. And it doesn't grow in clusters or groups, it just grows one here, one there, one here. And the flowers are so tiny, I don't even think they're as big as my little fingernail. I can't really see them with my eyes, to be honest, to distinguish them very well. But you take a photograph of them, and they just don't take a bad photo, they're just lovely. This is bladder pod lobelia. Some people call it Indian tobacco, I was trying to think of it. And the fruits are a lot like paper lanterns, you know, that bladder pod part of the name. It's just a beautiful little flower, and I don't remember ever seeing it until I came here. And this is another one, maybe you're familiar with it, it's, blue-eyed grass, giant grass, it's actually in the iris family. And I first saw this along the edge of the trail, and, the colors are just like drenched. This plant, this doesn't do it justice, the blue is so blue, and the yellow is so yellow. I couldn't believe this little plant when I first saw it, this has been a good year for it, there's been a lot of flowers. In the wet areas along the trails. And again, I don't never ever seen this plant before, but maybe I wasn't looking for it because I had 25 kids around me. I couldn't really, do that. There's a lot of ferns in this field, but they're pretty much hay-scented and bracken fern. Interestingly, bracken fern is poisonous to horses. Excuse me, Vidalia doesn't eat it. She doesn't really eat poisonous plants, she seems to know not to. And this is really tall in the field, it comes up to here easily, up to your hips or your waist. And in the fall, I love this fern because it turns all these metallic colors, bronze and copper and ivory and so forth. And the hay-scented turns kind of yellow. And it contributes to that yellow haze in the field from the birches. When I get bored in the winter, I'll go out to that field, as long as the snow's not too deep, and I'll, look at twigs, winter twigs and buds. And back in the day, excuse me, I loved my dendrology course. My tree course, I loved it. And this is the original, well, this is the book we had. Okay, it's by Carlo and Gerard. It's a textbook of dendrology. When I was in college, I had this textbook, and I had it the first year I was teaching, and somehow I lost it. And I was really upset. And then one day I came here to the Athol Ma Club, and this was in the bookcase there for sale. So I was really happy to get this copy. And this is really still the best book for identifying trees, I really think. It's all black and white photos, and they're all photographed in like the 30s and 40s, but I don't think it gets a whole lot better than this. So if you look at these winter buds that are in the field, 2 of them are aspen. So do you think you can tell which ones of the 4 are the aspen? Any ideas? How about this one right here? What kinds of aspen? What are the 2 kinds of aspen we have around here? You know them, because I know you know their names. What's that? Is it a quaking? There's a quaking aspen, or sometimes it's called trembling.
Big tooth.
And that's what this is. And then the big tooth is here. And around here, I think, do they call them poplar and popple a lot? Yeah, they didn't even call them aspen, they called them poplar or popple. So the quaking aspen has buds that are really shiny brown and pointed. And the big tooth aspen has more conical buds that are very frosty looking. Both of these are in the field, because both of these are pioneer species. They come in where the site is disturbed. Their seeds are airborne, so they just go in the air, and if they land in a disturbed spot, they grow quickly, they grow right away. But also aspen spread underground. They produce new plants from the underground, what do you call the underground part?
Rhizomes.
Right, is it a rhizome? Okay, and they're clones, so when you see a patch of an aspen, they're genetically identical to each other. Okay, and I think, isn't there a patch of aspen somewhere, it's called Pondo? And it's like acres and acres and acres of this aspen, and I don't know if it's in Canada or whatever, you know what I mean?
It's out west. Yeah.
What is that?
Colorado.
Colorado? Okay.
It's all one plant. They
Yeah.
just, you know, so-
Yeah, it's
What
just
do you-
considered like the largest organism in the world, I think, right? Right here, this is red oak. And then, so when you look at this one here, it's gonna give it away a little bit, because you notice how the twigs and the buds are opposite, they're not alternate. What is it?
Straight maple.
Yeah, you're right. It's a maple, first of all, because maples do have alternate. I'm sorry, opposite, let me tell it something. Opposite arrangement of their twigs and their buds. And it is striped maple, it kind of gives its name away right there. And there's quite a bit of striped maple at NEECA. It's kind of a characteristic understory tree, really like a shrub as much. And I find that if there's a butt rub, I don't know why, it's on a striped maple, I don't know why that is. And I love this tree because it's like orange and yellow and pink and green before the leaves come out fully. It's just like this really colorful maple. Anybody know what that is? This one is a little further down through the field, closer to the event area. This used to be a favorite of my kids on the South Shore, because it was so fuzzy and had a milky white sap, and we pulled the compound leaves off the twigs. It has compound leaves, and it's and again a disturbed site sort of tree. It grows near the salt marshes on the South Shore. It grows around schools because the schools are all around the salt marshes.
Sumac.
Sumac, yeah, and staghorn sumac.
Okay.
Yeah, and kids love this because they just love to feel the fur. The staghorn sumac. There's a couple of those in the park, not too many. There's a lot of gray birch, a lot of birches in general, but especially in disturbed areas like that field, gray birch is very common. The kids always would think of gray birch leaves as being the shape of an elephant's head. Because you'd have the ears and then the long trunk right here. And the cones or the catkins in the winter, if you take them in your fingers and just kind of go like that, all the bracts just kind of like formal right into your hand. And so that's a really nice winter food for birds and small mammals. I'll see it on the snow sometime, and you'll see animal tracks, mammal tracks. But there's a lot of gray birch. And Dave helped us with this one. One day Ernie and I were walking and we found this little snake right on the trail in that field. And at first I thought it was a ringneck snake because that's what I was familiar with on the South Shore. There was one of my schools where we could always find a ringneck snake under a rock near the school. But it's not a ringneck, it's
Red belly.
red belly. Yeah, I never knew about red belly. I guess I thought it was a ringneck because it kind of looked like it had a ring, but these are actually, I guess, 3 spots.
Yeah, it's got that patch on the top of the head.
Okay, so that's not considered one of the spots?
Yeah, that's just kind of like a brown patch.
Oh, okay, yeah. And in this one, the value is kind of orange. I guess they can be yellow or orange or red. And they're a little bit like the ringneck, so they're small and very secretive and they hide underneath, rocks and so forth.
Yeah.
Really little snake. This field, like I said, the towies are in there, and it's a great place for birding in spring and in fall. This is, of course, the female towee. And Ernie, I'm gonna let you jump in here. Ernie takes all the bird photos, because I just use a cell phone camera. That does not work for bird photos. So we're at the field still, and these are 3 birds that we would see at that early successional.
Yeah, the upper left is a prairie warbler, that's a little successional type bird. It nests in the low shrubs, and it's relatively common at NEECA. And the one below it on the left is another brushy early successional breeder, and that's a chestnut sided warbler. And you can see that This is probably a male, it's got a nice rich chestnut side to it. And the bird that's on the right is, you might know what that is? It's a catbird, and catbird is pretty common, and it's sitting on a spike of sumac,
Yeah,
which it feeds on in the winter time. So these are all relatively common around the early successional field, and almost anywhere you get some brush and such. And one thing that Linda doesn't, or just mentioned, is that all of these flower photos and all the other photos she's taken with her cell phone. And she's got very, very proficient at it.
yeah, we can shoot. The prairie warbler that I just love, because he just seems to sing all summer long. And I always forget the songs, like as soon as I get into the winter, but it's ascending, right? It's like, yeah. And I just hear them all the time, and I understand that if that field is to grow up, they are gone. That field is a perfect habitat for prairie warblers. So, thank you. And we're gonna end up this early successional field with another favorite of mine. I love beetles for some reason. I don't know why. I think they have a lot of personality. And this one has personality in spades. This was a tiger beetle. It's Saskatchewan, 6-spotted. Yeah. And when I'm walking in May, let's say, and it's this gravelly trail, you know, that goes through the field or the Stackstone Trail. The tiger beetle kind of like speeds up ahead of me, and they fly fast and they run fast. In fact, I guess they're faster than the best human sprinter, something like that. You just can't catch these things. You're better off just using the binoculars to see them. And they kind of go ahead and they turn around and they stare at you. And then I'll get a little closer and then go speeding ahead, flip around and stare at me. I just think they're so beautiful, so interesting. They're very ferocious. They eat other insects. They run them down like a cat. They've got these nasty jaws, really long jaws. They're like sickles. So at the end, they kind of slice and dice, and then they've got these jaws that chew and mash. And then they mix up that prey with their saliva, and they get this bunny milkshake, so they kind of drink that down, they spit out the remains. I don't know, I just think they're very interesting. I love their eyes. They've got huge eyes because they are predators, and they're lovely, they're beautiful. Their exoskeleton, I think the outer layers are red, bend the light so that they look green from above, but if you look at them from the side, they're more blue, and they're beautiful. So we're gonna go on the Elwyn Bacon Trail part that goes into the woods now. And excuse me, the forest that this trail goes through is your typical white pine, eastern hemlock, northern hardwood forest. And this part right here is actually quite near the field, quite near the barn. It's going uphill. It's very wet, very rocky. Vidalia lost her boots here, I remember, on one trail ride. And I walked this a couple years ago with here. Okay, she's retired. She does a lot of eye naturalists. Lynn Harper. Okay, I know it comes. I had Lynn come to NEECA. I wanted to show her NEECA. And we met at NEECA, and we were walking the trail. And this part of the trail, we counted 40 red Fs. You know, those orangey red Fs that are the juvenile of the nude. And we walked up the incline, very rocky, very wet. She took a picture of every single F, and I assume she posted it on iNaturalist. And they were headed towards Davenport Pond. If you kept walking in that direction, you would reach the pond. I don't know that they were going there necessarily to turn into newts, because they were different sizes, and I guess they can be juveniles for 2 to 7 years. Interestingly, she said on the South Shore, they don't have that juvenile, that middle stage. It's either a larva or it's adult moon. But anyways, Lynn said that the wonderful thing about the NEECA forest is not that it's so unique, it's just that it's so typical. You know, if you want to see the characteristic typical North Quadrant forest, NEECA has it. And I just love it, I just find it so beautiful, so restful. And I have way too many slides for this trail, so. Yeah, I didn't keep track of time. When I ended in that forest time. So there's our eastern hemlock and our white pine. These are 2 fundamental species of this forest, and they're not fundamental or foundational just because of the sheer numbers and there's lots of them. They really make the forest what it is. The soil is very thin, it's glacial rock underneath, so their evergreen needles provide a lot of the substrate for the other plants. And since they're evergreens, they contribute to the chemistry of that soil to a great degree. And obviously they provide food, they provide shelter and habitat to the wildlife. I would take my kids out and, you know, try to get them to have a connection with trees, for example. One thing we would do with white pine, and even the youngest kid could do this, we'd take a bundle of needles, and you probably know that to identify white pine, there's a bundle and there's 5 needles in the bundle. That's white pine. And even the youngest kids could count to 5. So we would take each needle and count to 5. And that meant it was white pine. Or they could spell white, WHITE. And I tried to help kids identify things, not because I wanted them to know the names especially, but if you ask most kids, what kind of tree is that? They'll say, it's a regular tree. What kind of bird is that? That's a regular bird. You know, that's just how they are. So I always try to like have them have a connection to see that everything has a name. And that there's a diversity out there. And all that diversity has names. So white pine was a tree that they learned in all my schoolyards, because there was always a white pine. And the other foundational tree was red oak. When I first came out here, I kind of skipped over red oak. I was so in love with the pines and the hemlocks, just like the red oak really didn't dawn on me. It was just kind of a real tall tree and kind of scraggly and had a lichen on it. But then the more I looked at it, I noticed, for example, how beautiful the bark is. It's very furrowed, and sometimes it has orange, sometimes it has green, sometimes it has ashy gray, but it looks very striped. It reminds me of a clown's striped pants, really. And the trees that we have here in the forest are very tall, and they don't really have much for branches. In the suburbs, the red oak is like short and squat, it's got these gorgeous, has crowns of branches and leaves that are, you know, massive. And these trees are very thin, well, not thin, but you know, they're not squat, and they're up there in the upper canopy. Now they have a tough time getting there. Acorns have a hard time surviving to germination. I think something like maybe 1% or less than 1% of the acorns get to actually grow into a seedling, something like that. And even if they do germinate, they have difficulties because they tend to lose their tops as seedlings. And so they resprout tops maybe several times. That's because there's dormant buds that are at the root collar. So at that terminal shoot, that terminal part of the growth gets killed off or lopped off or whatever. These dormant buds can grow lateral shoots. And so up here at the top here, those are lateral branches. There probably is no terminal branch up there. And if you look at the red oaks, more often than not, it's just forked up at the top. It's those two lateral branches that grew up out of those dormant buds way back. And I read that, you know, the root system can be like 10 or 15 years older than the top of the trees because of that. When I bring people out or children out, we learn that red oaks have pointed lobes with bristles, and white oak has rounded lobes. And kids love acorns. If I can find an oak tree, we're good for 20 or 25 minutes easily. If there's acorns on the ground, the kids, even the littlest kids, just want to pick them up and hold them and maybe pick them apart. And if there's weevil holes in them, all to the better. Read. Besides red oak and the eastern hemlock and white pine, there's a lot of red maple. And red maple follows these trees everywhere, whether it's a wet place, a dry place, an open place, a forested shadow place, there's red maple all over the park. This one is a pretty big one that Ernie's standing next to. And is there anything you want to say about that? No? Okay. But my favorite, I think, other than the hemlock, especially are the birches. I never saw birches all that often in my schoolyards in Weymouth. And in the park, some of the birches get to be pretty good size. This is a black birch right here. This is a yellow birch. And I think I just love them for their bark. When black birch is younger, the bark is just like a pewter. It's this beautiful shiny gray. And of course, the yellow birch, the color on yellow birch bark can vary. It can be almost as white as the white birch. It can be bluish upon yellow. It can be copper. It can be bronze, kind of brown, but it shines. No matter what color it is, it shines. And even the roots of yellow birch shine. And you'll often be able to see the roots because they tend to spill, which we'll look at in a second. But I would say birch is probably the most common tree at NEECA. I'm not sure, but wherever there's a space, there's young birch trees coming up. And you know, probably maybe there's more red maple, I don't know, but I didn't even know what these trees were when I first came, because I was just not aware of birches. Oh, and so that's our stilt. There's so many stilton birches there, and again, I didn't know what this was about. Excuse me, but when birch seeds land on the forest floor, they're particularly likely to grow on a nurse log or a nurse stump. And that's just a decomposing log or decomposing cut stump that is maybe covered with moss or covered with some decomposing leaves or whatever, but it's soft. It retains moisture. It's just a really nice place for birch seeds to germinate. Hemlock seeds also tend to like this. And in fact, you'll often find decomposing stump. You'll find a birch and you'll find a hemlock side by side on this nurse log or nurse stump. So this is actually yellow birch. I know it looks white, but this is a yellow birch. And when the seeds germinate and the tree starts to grow, the roots may tend to like snake over the stump and then down and around. And when that stump decomposes over the years, you're left with a birch kind of showing you by its root system what the shape of that nurse log or that nurse stump was, which is gone now. And I took a lot of photos of these. I just thought they were really interesting. A lot of times they'll also grow over big rocks. Hemlock likes to grow on rocks that's got moss on it and leaves and so forth. And again, the roots just kind of like go over and around and show you the shape of the substrate. Anybody know what this understory shrub is. It's very characteristic of this area. It's a beautiful shrub. It is, yeah, it's hobblebush. And I think this is like a beautiful shrub. I don't think it gets as much attention as it deserves. I would plant this in my yard. And it's very characteristic of this area in the understory. It's got the beautiful white flowers in the spring and the berries in the fall. But I think the leaves are also just beautiful. They're these heart-shaped leaves. And when they turn colors in the fall, it's interesting. They tend to have these interesting patterns of the leaf turning. It's at the edges, or it might follow the veins, but they just don't like turn all in color all at once, all over. They have this interesting variety of patterns. So that's hobblebush. And when you look at the buds, the other thing that's kind of interesting about them is they have no scales. So when you look at the bud, you're actually looking at the folded up leaves there. And I think it's a beautiful shrub. Why is it called hobblebush? Anybody know? Why is it called hobblebush? You know? Why do you trip? What does it, how does it do that to you?
I thought it's because you trip over it and then you hobble.
Yeah. Well, when I had that native plant walk, we started off with hobblebush, and someone said, she was, she was really a good observer. She said, have the deer been eating it? Because it was really low to the ground, for one thing. It was kind of like going along the ground. So it looked like maybe the deer came along and walked it off. But it does tend to grow low to the ground, and then where the branches touch the soil, it will root. So you get these hobbles.
It's also called moosewood. That's a nickname for it.
Well, moosewood is I've heard of moosewood being the name for striped maple.
That's what somebody told me, but maybe that just.
Well, and sometimes, that's the thing about names is like, for example, wintergreen. I don't even use that name except for one plant, because there's at least 3 or 4 plants use wintergreen for.
Yeah.
So moosewood's kind of the same way. I heard moosewood used, I think, for more than just striped maple, and I don't know why. It probably goes back to way back, and what you were taught, as a kid, what things were called too. And while I'm talking about moosewood or striped maple, that's on the left. This is in the spring. Excuse me. And then another shrub that's very common at NEECA, of course, is mountain laurel. And mountain laurel, interestingly, is extremely poisonous to equines, all parts of it, including the pollen. Yeah. Now, doesn't mean horses are gonna go start eating it on you, but it's just something, I tell equestrians, it's like if you've got this around your barn or your house or on the trail, you just want to be aware of it, because it is one of the more poisonous plants that your horse can get into. Oh, darn. So we're gonna look at a few of the animals on the Alma Basin Trail, and there's the red eft. That there were 40 of them climbing that incline of the trail in the woods. And this is the juvenile or the middle stage of the red-spotted newt. When it was a larva, it was in the water, it was aquatic. Then they become this terrestrial land-dwelling, roving juvenile. And I guess, they can be in this stage for 2 to 7 years. When they do go to the pond and become mature, they become that red spotted newt, so they're aquatic again. So this is probably the stage where they get to expand their range. They can go from the parent pond, so to speak, and maybe colonize a different area. The redback salamander is the salamander of my childhood. I'll bet all of you have things you just like really were gravitating towards when you were a kid. I bet you were just like me. And I live in the suburbs, but I run out of the house after school and go to the woods that is now, of course, development and turn over logs, and I just look at redbacks for hours. And it's something about them, I don't know what it is, but they're a really interesting salamander. For one thing, you know, they have no lungs. So the reason you don't see them very often is that they're either under a log or they're underground, they breathe through their skin. And underground, they have a very rich emotional life. I didn't know this until recently. The female guards her eggs, and the male patrols his territory. Well, they're under the ground there. And the salamander basically has a community. There's males, there's females, there's teenagers, and there's the babies. And this is unusual, the babies are not aquatic like a lot of salamanders are. They have gills for a while, but they're underground with their parents and grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles. The male will defend his territory, he'll drive out interlopers, but he'll tolerate his immediate family, so to speak. And there were some experiments where they removed the males quite a few miles away, and they found their way back home again. And they've got these really big eyes, and you have to wonder if you live in the darkness, why do you have big eyes? But I assume they need the big eyes because they eat all these tiny invertebrates and gotta be able to see them, I guess. But the main thing about these salamanders is that when you're walking on the ground, you're pretty much walking on salamanders, on this particular kind of salamander. And they're hugely important in the food chain because they eat the invertebrates and they convert it into salamander flesh. And then that goes right up the food chain. You know, they're very important in that way. So just a really interesting salamander. Like I said, I had a real fondness for them and for the new or the F. You want to do the birds? This is on again the Ellen Bacon Trail, and
Yeah, a lot of birds, the whole area is pretty rich. I kind of counted up species wise, not that I've seen there, but that I have seen and I might expect to see. And you're probably talking about 100 species of birds throughout the year. Pileated woodpecker is one, and this is a male. You can see that red mark on the throat. And this is looks like a hemlock tree that has been bored by the pileated, and they're not uncommon. Back in our day, when we were young birds, these were very rare, but they're not anymore. They're pretty common. One of my favorites is a yellow-bellied sapsucker. For those of you who aren't familiar with birds, this is such a beast. This is a female, and I can tell it's a female because it doesn't have a red throat. They're called sapsuckers because in the spring particularly, they drill these, they're called wells. And they'll peck them particularly in maple trees or on my house. And they ooze sap. They will suck the sap or sip the sap. And they'll also eat the bugs that get attracted to the sap. And these are older ones that kind of, the bark has tended to grow a little bit, but very, very common around here. And kind of a fun bird. Probably our most common owl that we have around here, a barred, not barn, but barred owl. And it's known for its 8 hoots. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? And here's a feather that floated down. Oh.
That's interesting.
Oh, I know what this is. Oh. It's where you get that.
Just okay that one first, yeah.
All right, some other birds, common bird, in the forest here, all in the North Quadrant is an oven bird. And I was walking along this Elwyn Bacon Trail down toward Davenport Pond, and an oven bird flew up from my feet. And I stopped and I looked, And it was, I think, the first time that I've ever seen or found an ovenbird nest. They're called an ovenbird because they make this little dome-shaped nest on the ground. And if you look real carefully, right here, you'll see baby ovenbird. You can see the yellow gate right here. And that's its beak. So there's a young ovenbird that's sitting in that nest. And then another bird that's pretty common around here. And what is it?
Flicker.
It's a flicker, yellow shafted flicker. And the male or female. All right, this is a male, it has a mustache. So this is a male, pretty common around here. Red-bellied woodpecker, back in our days when we started, they weren't here. And this is a female, it does, if it was a male, it would have the red go all the way around. Gonna skip this bird for a second. Common woodland bird around here, this is a male scarlet tanager. Another relatively common bird, particularly the hemlocks and pines, is a black-throated, is the black-throat green warbler. And this is a male. Jeff and I were in May, a couple of years ago, Jeff had built a bluebird house, and we were going down to install a bluebird house around the horse enclosures and the arenas. And we saw this bird fly along the side of the road, flew up and landed. And this is what we found. This is a NEECA picture of a bird that you very rarely see around here. And its name is, it's very descriptive. This is a red-headed woodpecker. A real red-headed woodpecker. Males and females look exactly alike. And this was a, big black back, white wing patches, and totally red head. Males and females look the same. You can't tell if it's a male or a female. It has no mustache that we can identify it. That bird was there in the morning. There's a couple people went to see it, and it was gone in the afternoon. It was just passing through.
Well, yeah, but, well, we were still on the elevator trail, and, I guess I have a lot of things I like a lot, because I also like, ground covers a lot for some reason. I think it's because I don't have great vision, but I get down on my hands and knees and get real close and see these little plants pretty well. This is teaberry, and just as dewberry is very, very common at the park. Teaberry is another really, really characteristic ground cover of this kind of forest. And if it's in the sun, if it happens to be in the part of the forest where the sun hits, you'll see the flowers. They're kind of these pretty little white flowers that nod. And of course, they become those tea berries. And I'll bet most of you people are familiar with the fact that tea berry has a lovely, like a cinnamon spicy scent and taste. And we used to have tea berry gum when we were kids, and it wasn't made from these berries, but it was a very similar taste. Excuse me. And like I said, this is just an evergreen, low growing. I think it's in the heath family. Very, very common, just growing in mounds everywhere in the park. What's this one? This is one that a lot of people get very passionate about how it smells. Anybody have an idea?
Mayflower?
What is that?
Is there a Mayflower?
Some people call it Mayflower, yeah.
So trailing arbutus?
Right, trailing arbutus, and people call it Mayflower. When I was on the native plant walk, it was amazing how people just all of a sudden piped up about how it smells. Smell is connected to memory. And so if this is a plant that as a kid you would smell it, you just would never forget that delicious scent. It's very hard to describe. It's just very unique, but it's just wonderful. And my memory of arbutus, I never saw it in the South Shore that I know of, but it grew in back of Ernie's family home. And, excuse me, when we would come to visit in May, he would always walk out back and pick his mother a sprig of trailing arbutus, and she would take a shot glass of water and put it on the kitchen windowsill and put the sprig there, and she just did it every year. It was just kind of like a memory of, you know, his mom and him, and that early time when we visited with the boys and so forth. So, and this is very, common at the park, not as common as the tea-berry, but, definitely a sign of spring that I look for every year. You know, I try to get down and get up, so I can smell it. And we won't go into all these flowers too much, but there's some really nice, not unusual wildflowers, but nonetheless, they're kind of stunning to me. I don't think I'd ever seen painted trillium until I came to NEECA. It's not common, but it's right on the edge of the trail, literally like within a horse's nose length. There's a lady slipper right there, again, not real common, but it's present. Blushberry is ground cover that tends to grow where it's very disturbed. And it grows in back of the food shed where, you know, they cut down the trees to make room for the trailer parking lot. It's all over the place underneath the trees that are remaining there. And I think this one does spread also by rhizomes too. And then of course, ghost pipe. I don't know about you, but ghost pipe, I saw everywhere this year. It was just all over the woods underneath the trees. There's a lot that could be said that's interesting about ghost pipe, but I don't think we'll do it tonight. This is another one of my favorites. This is called gold thread. It's called gold thread because this also has rhizomes and they're kind of yellow color. It's a very small plant. The leaves, there's 3 evergreen leaves. They look a lot like 3-leaf clovers. I thought they were at first, but they're thick and they're waxy and they're evergreen. The flowers are very small, but I just think they're lovely, and they come out in early spring. And then of course, how about this one, everybody? This is like trailing arbutus. It's just like one of those iconic ground covers of the quadrant woods. Which one is this one? And look at the leaves, because the leaves might tell you what it is. Let me guess.
Leaves look like ginger.
Say it again?
The leaves look like ginger.
They do, you know, probably it's confusing because these leaves look pretty big. These leaves are as big as your little fingernail. So, okay, I guess I better tell you, and the flowers are tiny too. This is partridge berry. And you know partridge berry, okay, you know the berries, those scarlet berries, you know, they're like the tea berry, they're the scarlet berries on the forest floor. But, excuse me, the flowers of partridge berry are really fuzzy and they come in pairs. And you can identify the leaves usually because they're very small, they're round or kind of heart-shaped, and they usually have this white or yellow midrib that shows up pretty well. Probably not as well in that photo as some others. And right here is a better example. You can see that white or yellow midrib of the leaf. And it's kind of a round or heart-shaped leaf, and there's the berry. When I first came out here and I saw the partridge berries, I thought, oh, there's animals eating them, little holes in them. And then as I learned more, I realized that those twin flowers that you saw, those fuzzy twin flowers, the ovaries fuse to make one berry. So these 2 dimples are kind of like the remnants of that process, where that one berry actually came from 2 flowers. And if you look at partridge berry the next time, you'll probably notice those dimples, or they look like little eyes almost. There's quite a few tree club mosses and club mosses at the park, which also are really interesting to me. This one is sometimes called staghorn moss, sometimes it's called wolf's foot. It's a club moss that runs along the ground, and it will root as it runs along the ground. And then every once in a while, it will kind of become erect. And that's where the spore cones will be. And it's just a really interesting ground cover to me. When I first saw it, I didn't know what it was. So this is a quiz. All of these are really iconic ground covers in the North Quabbin Woods, and these were all taken at NEECA. So let's see how you do. This is probably late fall, early winter, because some of these are kind of purple or red, which is characteristic. So what do you think this one is right here? It's also right here. Very good. Yeah, excellent. And it does turn this beautiful plummy or red color in the winter, really lovely in the winter time. Okay, so how about that? Yeah. Well, compared to this, that's a partridge berry. This one is the trailing arbutus. Okay, and then let's see, right here. I give this to you, although you can see the 3 leaves that look like 3-leaf clover. Do you remember which one that was?
Is that the gold thread?
That was the gold thread, very good. And we didn't go into this one too much. This is not a club moss, but it's close to a club moss. What do you usually call this? What's like the common name for this? Do you call it princess pine? And I just say it's a tree club moss because there's actually, I think, 3 princely piney sort of tree club mosses, but a tree club moss is just, it's dendrolycopodium. It's a lycopodium that looks like a dendro, looks like a tree. And to wrap this up, this spring, around the time that the wood frogs were leaving the vernal ponds and starting to roam around the woods, I found these 2 wildflowers, and these are 2 wildflowers that let's see, where did she go? Where's the flower go? No, I lost her. Anyways, Mary Dickerson wrote about these 2 wildflowers, how they come out when the wood frogs are kind of out in the woods. And this one right here is Shinleaf pyrola. And she said it has a lovely smell. I didn't think to get down on my hands and knees and smell it at the time, so I will next spring. And this is called Pipsissewa, and that's another one of those names. It's like people have 2 or 3 plants that call Pipsissewa. This is the true Pipsissewa, and where this is kind of like an erect stem here, the leaf where the flowers come off the stem. This is like a stem, and then the flowers come off in kind of a nodding fashion. And both of these are green plants, but they do get some of their nutrition from fungi that are under the ground, which I did not know, but they're lovely. And like I said, I saw them for the first time this year, and they were under the mixed hardwood conifer typical area. So, oh, one more. I have a plant crush on this one. I remember walking the trail of Vidalia, and we went by a place where one of the jumps were cross-country events, and there was one of these there looking just like this with these beautiful purple berries and the red centers of the leaves. It was standing a little bit above the ferns and above the grasses and the tea berry and so forth, and it just looked very exotic to me. And this is called, some people call it Indian cucumber root. I call it meadow. And it's kind of an interesting plant because, excuse me, when it's young, it comes up on a thin stem. It just has a whorl of leaves, like 5 or 7 leaves. As it gets older, it has a second whorl, and this is the second whorl of leaves right here. It's got a flower that's like a little teeny lily, which I guess it is a lily. And very insignificant little flower, when you look at it up close, it looks like a yellow spider, it's very interesting. And the flowers become, in the fall, these beautiful, fleshy, purpley black berries. And supposedly the red center is to attract, I guess, birds and insects, probably birds more than insects, to take the berries and carry them off into the woods. And this is one of those plants that produces a clonal colony. So usually when you see meadow, you won't see one plant, you'll see like kind of a, not a mass, because they're not massed, but like maybe an octagonal pattern of several of these, and they're all genetically identical because they spread by rhizomes. And I guess maybe with a bird carrying off the berries, that's a way to ensure genetic diversity, because they're taking those genes and bringing them off into the woods, you know, somewhere else. But I think this is just a beautiful plant, really, like I said, kind of exotic looking. Okay, so I think we probably have to stop here. Maybe we gotta finish up another time. I think we really consider the matter.
Why don't you just go through?
No, I'd rather not. It's just too many flowers. Good luck on the time. Is that amenable to you guys? You want to stop here? Don't worry about hurting my feelings. What's that? What's that?
I said, this is my favorite part.
Oh.
It's okay.
You want me to do the vernal pool?
Yeah, let's do the vernal.
Okay. So let's see, the Three Chicks Trail, which is one of those smaller trails, goes by a vernal-type pool. I'm not sure that it's truly vernal. I call it the vernal-type pool or pond. And this is another one of those places, it's like the successional field. It just doesn't take a bad picture. Obviously, that's like December. This is obviously spring. And it's actually the same view. This right here is this tree right here. And this is a few years later from this view. Excuse me. And when you look at this, it looks like you're like really in the middle of nowhere. And it feels like it. It's absolutely quiet, totally quiet. And, you know, it's just sheltered by all these hemlocks especially. And at least a couple times a year, I have to visit this vernal-type pond. I go in April for the wood frogs, because I've got to listen to the wood frogs. And usually what I'll do is I'll be walking on the Three Chicks Trail, and I'll hear them, and then I'll go just a few yards off the trail, really. And I used to sit, I think I used to sit on this, but it's kind of collapsed now. Just listen to these frogs, and it's just deafening. You feel like your head is going, because they're so loud. And so that's one of my rituals here. But I also just like to go in the middle of the winter, other times of the year. And it's just, like I said, so quiet, so peaceful. I remember one time I was out there, it was while the wood frogs were chorusing, and a plane went overhead, just a single engine plane. And the frogs just all cut. They just stopped. And they didn't resume the whole time I stayed there. I stayed there an extra 10 minutes and never came back again. And I told Ernie about it, and he says, well, you know, I think he told me this, the barred owl is a predator on the wood frog. So probably what you thought was that that plane was a barred owl coming overhead. And so they just shut up and didn't resume. Did you tell me that? Or? I don't know a lot about vernal ponds. Yeah, I know a little bit more about the buffer zone, which is the trees, and really that buffer zone of hemlocks and pines. It's like the second half of the pool. It's just as important for a lot of different reasons. Because for one thing, the hemlocks and pines really affect the water chemistry. Because those needles decompose very, very slowly, and the red oak leaves as well. And that kind of gradually meets out the nutrients to all those invertebrates and so forth. Red maple is not the same. Red maple is kind of taking over in many spots where the hemlock's, declining. And red maple leaves just decompose really fast. So that rate of decomposition can affect the life in the pond. The trees keep the temperature stable. They provide shade and shadow, they filter the water. When the leaves decompose, they make a detritus. Detritus is like particulate organic matter. It's not dissolved, it's just, you could see it, it's kind of floating. And a lot of the tadpoles eat that and so forth. And so these trees are extremely important, this buffer zone trees, to the pond. And so I always give the board of directors a hard time whenever they're talking about improving the trails or kind of doing something to the trails. They know they need to skirt me, because if they go near my vernal pond, I'm gonna say something to them. So anyways. There's your wood frog. And I think this is probably taken in the fall, because he's looking a little, like he's been eating a lot of invertebrates and a lot of worms. I think he's probably getting ready for hibernation. And I love this frog. I think of Rocky Raccoon. He's got that mask. He's got this really interesting yellow, I don't know if it's an upper jaw or lower jaw that has that yellow line. Their color varies. I've seen them look flesh colored and peach colored and brown colored and all kinds of color variations. But they get their start in the vernal pond, and then they're only there for a few weeks, and then the adults leave and they start to go up through the woods and through the meadow there and into the forest that's a little bit higher, but not far away. And that's where I find them during the rest of the year. They're just kind of like under the trees, on the leaves and the grass and so forth. And I'll just flush them up when V and I are walking. We'll just kind of flush them up and then put them. This. And you help me identify this.
Your eggs, so.
I think you told me spotted salamander. Does that sound?
Yeah, I think the spots.
Okay. And like, I didn't know, I thought they were frog eggs, okay? So Dave, am I right, when you're trying to identify salamander eggs, it is that they have this jelly mass around the eggs.
Right.
You can kind of see the eggs.
Encapsulates the whole mass,
Okay, yeah,
where the wood frog eggs are individual eggs.
okay, okay.
And it makes so that they don't have that jelly around the outside.
Yeah, okay. I finally understood that. And then, I remember reading somewhere, to bring this up on the Jefferson salamander, because, wood frog is an obligate species of vernal ponds, and spotted salamanders are.
Mhm.
So Jefferson, is a Jefferson salamander like a morph of the spotted or something?
No, it's a different species, but it's, they're quite uncommon. But their egg mass tends to be a lot more linear. And they'll often do it on a branch like that, but really stretched out. But they're also, they're related to the blue spot and the Jeffersons, and there's all kinds of DNA. Weird stuff that goes on between their gene stuff, so, but anyway, we have Jefferson salamanders rarely in the area.
So is there a salamander where the egg mass is like opaque white?
Any of them can do that,
All right,
what I mean, after they mature a bit. And especially if they don't hatch, they'll turn white sometimes, or,
so are they like?
well, there could be an algae gets
Okay,
into the egg mass.
okay, because I would see that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's an algae actually that gets into them.
What did I just do? Oh, no, I don't want that. How did I get there? Okay, I'm gonna go backwards here. Oh, my,
Just keep going.
Oh. Oh.
That's the end of the walk.
Yeah. Okay, it's all followed up. I mean, it's all over the place here.
Yeah.
I can't believe I just did that. Well, maybe we're done. You wanna fix it? No, okay. I think we'll have to stop. Oh, geez.
Yeah, I think we should go.
I think it's trying to tell me you're finished. So, we'll stop there. But thank you, everybody. I hope I didn't ramble on too much. I think you can see I'm not a great naturalist. I'm more of a teacher. But I'm a generalist, I guess you'd say. I don't have any specialties. But I just really love being outdoors with my horse and walking NEECA. And I hope you'll maybe visit NEECA sometime and just take advantage